Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. We actually just got back to the studio from Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders hit up the Death Star for their mock game. Those are always a ton of fun. The fans get to come out, so always cool. I love podcasts like this. So today we are diving into our observations and our biggest takeaways from that mock game. We'll be talking about Geno Smith's impressive performance. He was really on point. The connection between him and Brock Bowers, that was on display. But we also can't forget about Michael Mayer either. He showed out too. Now we got to look at what the starting lineup would likely be if the season started today. It is worth noting that it doesn't start today. But that's going to be for both sides of the ball and some interesting takeaways there of what it could mean going forward. And sadly, we also have to talk about an injury. Lonnie Johnson Jr. went down today. I'm no doctor, but it definitely didn't look good. And he actually had to be carted off. Now we'll get into that and what Pete had to say about it and what it means for the defense going forward too. So with that, guys, let's get the podcast rolling. For starters, the scrimmage was set up with the ones going against the twos. And then later in the day, they actually started mixing everyone in and gave the threes a shot to do their thing too. We'll get into some of those guys as well. But first off, let's talk some personnel stuff. The first team offensive line, we got to look at it. Colton Miller was at left tackle. Dylan Parham was at left guard. Jordan Meredith was lined up at center, which we've seen a lot of times throughout camp as he and Jackson Powers-Johnson are seemingly battling for that spot. But big butt here, JPJ again was lined up at right guard, which we saw the last couple days at practice. And he and Kappa actually rotated as the day went through with the ones there. But JPJ did get the initial start at right guard. It really seems like that's where the staff likes him. DJ Glaze was also at right tackle. But with that, let's get back to JPJ and kind of what it means, with him and Kappa. Obviously, now it seems that here's the thing, too. Afterwards, we talked to Jordan Meredith. So that, to me, leads me to believe that he's going to probably end up being the guy at center. And he's talking like, the staff believes he will be that dude for them starting at center. He said they approached him in the offseason and said, get ready to play some center. And he did. He seems like a real cerebral guy. This was the first time we had an opportunity to chat with him. And it's clear he's kind of picked it up. He said he worked some guard or worked some center when he was back in college. So it's nothing completely new. Obviously, he's mostly been a guard in the league. But for him, it's one of those things where it seems like he's going to be the starting center now. And I think the staff likes Jackson Powers-Johnson better as a right guard. That just seems to be where we are in camp right now. But again, he's battling with Alex Kappa. As we've talked about many times, we've talked about the offensive line a ton, which I know isn't the sexiest thing in the world, but this is an interesting battle. So now it's Kappa versus Jackson Powers-Johnson, the way things are currently set up, because we haven't seen Jackson working center, since the whole move to the right guard thing. So I think maybe they are moving forward now with Jackson being the guy at right guard that's going to be battling with Kappa, who, again, they brought in, signed him to an $11 million deal for 2 years. He's got a connection to Spy Tech. He's obviously a vet. He's been there, done that. He's also a bigger guy. But we know Jackson plays with, a ton of strength and a ton of aggressiveness. So that's going to come into play as well. But those two guys seemingly battling. Overall, forget about personnel and stuff like that. I thought the protection was really good, especially with the ones, and particularly with the ones. The two struggled a bit, actually. We'll get to that. But on the ones, the side of things, like they were protecting Geno very well. He had time. When he didn't have time, they gave him a pocket enough to kind of like move around in and do his thing. And with that, we do have to talk about Geno because he was the story of the day easily. That first drive, he only had one incompletion. Shout out to Cameron Richardson for the pass breakup in coverage. I think it was against Thornton, if I remember right. But Geno was really spreading it around. He actually threw to 6 different guys on that opening drive alone, was really sharing the rock. And he capped off that first drive by finding Brock Bowers, who settled in the zone, threw it right on a rope to him for their first touchdown, which was a theme of things to come because their second touchdown came shortly after on the next drive when Geno hit Brock on like a beautiful back shoulder ball. I don't remember who was in coverage on that one off the top of my head here, but that was a stellar play between the two of them. We saw a ton of those guys connecting with each other in terms of Brock and Geno. And that's obviously going to be a connection we see a lot of. I jokingly said on Twitter during the scrimmage, like, whatever the weekly number is for Brock in terms of catches, go ahead and hammer the over. And again, this isn't real betting advice. I'm just saying Brock is going to get a lot of targets. We've heard Geno say that he feels bad when he doesn't throw the ball to him in a game-type setting like today was, albeit against the twos. Keep that in mind. All of this stuff was the ones versus the twos versus the ones So just, again, keep that in mind when I'm talking about all this stuff. But Geno and Brock on point, the comfortability, easy to see. Brock was doing it at many different levels, very active. But overall, Geno really, really impressed me and a lot of other folks out there today. The accuracy was easy to see. It was on display all day. He read the defense very well, showed off the short, intermediate, and deep work as well throughout the whole layers of the scrimmage, because he even worked in with some guys that are likely going to be threes or fringe roster guys too, but threw deep to Philip Dorsett as well, so mixing in with a bunch of different guys. He even flashed the legs late in the game on a 2-point conversion as well. On the podcast, when we talked to Kirk Morrison, he mentioned the fact that he thinks people are sleeping on Geno's legs and people don't realize just how athletic he actually is. Put that on display today. And obviously, athleticism side of being a runner, he is very athletic in the pocket and has shown many times that he's able to kind of buy time and wait, move around, and play the pocket very well to give himself a lane to throw a ball. Albeit, again, that there's going to be a lot of caveats in here because it's a scrimmage, all this stuff, and they're not hitting the quarterbacks. But he looked solid in the pocket, read things well, was moving around well, kept his eyes down the field, and bought himself time when he needed to. So was really impressed with him. Chip Kelly also was not afraid to show off that 12 personnel bag that he has. Lots of work for both Brock and Michael Mayer. They were heavily involved. With Michael Mayer in particular, he looks very comfortable, looks very athletic too. He's a big dude. I think he's pushing 250, 260, but looks very nimble out there, maybe more so than in years past. He is, again, a big dude, but was playing some solid football and looks just comfortable, I guess is a good way to put it. The athleticism was clear to see. The way that he's been used is very interesting, and I think that's going to be something you guys are going to be seeing a lot of, is that 12 personnel, because both of those guys are very dynamic tight ends. I mean, we saw Mayer when he was at Notre Dame get split out wide a lot too, and he's a big body, a jump ball type of guy. So I think they're going to be doing that with him, and today he even actually had a big catch over the middle as well, when they were doing the scrimmage too. So I believe that was on the second drive. So was very active on that second drive and in many different situations. But just know this, Chip Kelly's not afraid to show off the fact that the tight ends are going to be heavily involved in the offense. That's obviously not breaking news. We know Brock Bowers is one of, if not the best tight ends in the league, so that's not going to surprise anybody. But the two of them going to be used a lot. And as I've said on the podcast many times before, I think Ian Thomas also factors into that too, because those three of them together offer a really interesting challenge for teams. Also, speaking of things that Chip Kelly has not been afraid to talk about, to show off all those things, is Ashton Jeanty in the passing game. They've talked up his hands a ton, and he was split out wide a handful of times today, especially on that first drive. So he was involved in the passing game. When I shot my quick little kind of preview for this podcast out on the field at Allegiant, some people were asking what? No Jeanty? He just didn't have any major massive runs, but he had some good plays. But it wasn't those super splashy ones, but he definitely flashed in the receiving game, which is big. And we've talked about how he's going to be involved in the passing game. Back again in 2023 when he's at Boise, he led the country in receiving yards by a running back. So he's got that in his bag, and Chip really wants to get him involved. We've seen Chip do that in his time in the league, and now he's got a really dynamic back who is so dangerous in space and has solid hands. Jeanty's going to catch the ball a lot. Keep that in mind, fantasy owners. We dove into that in our newsletter, and we're going to be talking about that a lot because, again, Chip really likes him there, and he's going to be using him a lot in that sense. But with that, let's talk some defense now. When the first unit rolled out there, Darian Porter and Eric Stokes were the two starting corners for them. Now, that's important just because, again, like we talked about earlier, if the season were to start today, that's probably the group that you see. So that tells you where the coaching staff is leaning. And it's also not some major surprise, the fact that Darian Porter's out there. The coaching staff has thrown him in there with the ones pretty much right from the jump. They've liked what they've seen from him very clearly. And so now, again, we get more confirmation that Darian Porter is leading that race for the starting cornerback spot opposite Eric Stokes. I've said many times, it looks like Stokes has that other spot locked down. He comes in as a vet. He very clearly has the trust of this coaching staff, and he's played really well. He hasn't, shown up in a bad way. I think I said the other day, he hasn't been getting beat or anything like that a ton. So whenever he's been in coverage, we kind of don't hear from him, which I think is a good thing with your corners. So Darian Porter, again, though, flashing. They're testing him, and he's played well. Been impressed with him. But to open that first drive for the defense, which again was the twos against Aiden O'Connell. Sorry, the ones against Aiden O'Connell and the twos. And so the ones came out in a 4-3 base. So they had their three linebackers out there. They had Landon Roberts, Devin White, and Jermaine Pratt rolled out there with those guys. So if they go 4-3, which I don't think we're going to see a ton, but there's obviously going to be some 4-3 packages. Those are going to probably be your three linebackers. No big shocker there. We talked about, Jamal Adams and how he comes in as a rotational guy in some packages and what he brings to the table. If you hadn't seen that podcast with Kirk Morrison, he does a great job of breaking down what Jamal can provide at that will linebacker spot. So make sure you check out our YouTube check out our podcast that's on YouTube and every other platform from Friday when we caught up with Kirk. He was awesome. But then at 3 technique, moving down to the defensive line now, Jonah Laulu, he was there with that first group. Again, not a massive shocker. He's been the guy getting first crack at that throughout camp. We did see later on in the scrimmage, Tyree Wilson get some more burn at that spot. He also played some edge. We've talked about the fact that he's moved around a lot, and Jonah moved around too. But that's basically what the starting defense looked like. We have also talked about how Maxx Crosby is one of those guys that when the pads come on, he ruins practice. Well, today was an example of that. I'm sure some of you guys have seen the video on social media. If you haven't, go find it. This play from Maxx was insane. He literally took the ball right off of Aiden O'Connell's hands, fooled the cameraman that was shooting it and fooled Aiden because Aiden is looking around like, where the heck did the ball go? And Maxx picks that thing up and takes it right to the house, like, I don't know, maybe like 50 yards, a little more than that. Just took off, and then he went and dunked it on the goal posts, So that was a really cool play. Easily the play of the day. I don't think anybody else came close to that. That was an unreal play by Maxx, and just, again, another example of how that dude is just different. And while we're talking about him here, I didn't put this in there when I was kind of thinking through the structure of the podcast in my head. So we're going a little off track here. But what I do want to get to is the whole Micah Parsons stuff. Obviously, he requests a trade. There's some interesting, things that could happen there. Do I think the Raiders trade for him? No, I don't. I'll come out and say that right away. But is it interesting to think about? Heck yeah, it is, because that would be a massive move. I think everybody in the league should be talking, is this something we should make a move for? I put out on Twitter that NFL.com, did a little write-up on the Raiders and the fact that, salary cap-wise, they're in a good position to be able to handle a trade for Micah in terms of signing him to a longer-term deal. The big question is, are you willing to part ways with 2 first-round picks and possibly a player or two, not possibly, definitely a player or two as well. It'd be a big trade. And obviously they'd like Malcolm Kuntz. They want to see what he can do. But to be fair, like Micah Parsons is another one of those guys that is an elite. And if you have an opportunity to get a guy like that, you go for it. And John Spytek has shown that he's not afraid to take big swings. And so maybe they do go for it. Who knows? That's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to watch. But there's no denying that Maxx on one side and Micah on the other, especially in the AFC West, when you think about the quarterbacks they're going against, specifically Mahomes, that would be a total game changer for the Raiders. If they find a way to make that happen, or they think that they want to make that happen, Raider Nation, I know you guys would be going crazy for that. Us as media members, that would be fun to watch as well. The two of them working together, that would easily make them the best rush duo in the league, and it wouldn't even be close. But again, I don't really think that's going to happen. That'd be a lot to give up. But Pete wants to win now. Spytek wants to win now. Maybe you mortgage the future, and you go and do that. And if you do that, then you just have locked up 2 of the best pass rushers in the league for quite a while. And that would be a scary thought, again, specifically in the AFC West against Mahomes. I mean, you got to figure out a way to stop him. And look at the teams that have had success against him. What they've done. They've managed to get to him, sack him, get off his point. But anyway, with that, let's kind of pivot back and get back into the scrimmage today. Overall, I did think that the D-line as a whole, as we're talking about possibly bringing Minka, I keep saying Minka, like Minka Fitzpatrick, Micah Parsons. But overall, I did like what I saw from the D-line. They looked good, especially going against the second-team offensive line. Because if you think about it, the right side of that offensive line on the second unit is pretty good. When Kappa was working there, or when JPJ was working there, you've also got Thayer Munford on the right side, at right tackle next to those two. That's a group that's played some good football. So I think you can trust that side. It's the side on the left where you're like, I don't know. That's where the rookie Charles Grant, is learning, but has shown some promise. Will Putnam was at center, and there's some question marks about what it looks like outside of that. Mafi was another guy working in a guard on the left side. So there's a bunch of different things there. But the second team O-line did struggle a bit against the first unit, which should be the case because they have Maxx Crosby, who, like we said, is really good at football. And, Malcolm Kuntz, all those guys, they were getting good pressure today. And again, Max makes the play of the day there against Aiden. But overall, too, like I said earlier, I was talking about the corners. I do really like what I saw out of those guys as we move back, through the back of the defense. It was clear that the second team offense wanted to test them down the field a bit. The coaching staff wanted to see specifically what Darian Porter could do. And, they came through in coverage, especially Porter and definitely Eric Stokes as well. I was really, really impressed with what I saw from that group. The second team offense struggled today. Let's say that. They struggled early going up against that group. DeCamerion Richardson also, again, like I noted, did start to rotate in, with some of the ones, and he is, again, definitely in the mix. I noted the fact that on that first drive that Geno had, DCam came away with the pass breakup as well in coverage. So DCam has looked good, and he is 100% competing with Darian Porter for that starting spot. And now today we have to get to the stuff that I hate talking about, man. It sucks. Injuries. Injuries are no fun, especially, you don't want to see anybody get hurt, but especially to a guy like Lonnie Johnson Jr. Man, he got rolled up on, when they was running to make a tackle. Looked like he hurt his right leg. They brought the card out. Obviously, that's never a good sign when they bring the card out. The whole team gathered around him. You could tell, you could tell by the reaction what the injury probably is. The player realizes the severity of it. And it just sucks, man. It really sucks because just a couple days ago at practice, Lonnie Johnson Jr. is up there saying, he wants to prove that he deserves a long-term deal with the Raiders, and he wanted to retire as a Raider. He noted that he's got a family. He's tired of jumping around from team to team and all that stuff. And I think that's something that gets lost in the shuffle, that these players are humans too. And obviously they're getting paid very well, millions of dollars, all these things. And they're playing a kid's game, for a living. And we all know that, and they realize that. We don't even need to mention that. But from a human level, that really sucks to see this happen to a guy like that who was so ready and fired up to prove to this staff what he could do. So again, we don't know if he's out for the year, but after the scrimmage, Pete did say that he needs more information, but he said it is, quote, significant. And just given everything else that we saw as it all played out on the field, it doesn't look great. So obviously hoping the best for Lonnie Johnson Jr. because, we would love to see him be able to get back out there and show this staff that he indeed does deserve a long-term deal. But definitely this is going to be a roadblock to overcome, and we'll see how long he's out. Once we get word for that, we definitely will be reporting that for you guys. But just sad stuff. And in terms of how this affects the defense, well, look, Lonnie wasn't a quote-unquote starter, but he was kind of, because he was actually the first safety off the bench when they would go to nickel. Now, I know a lot of you guys have asked about the nickel package as a whole, who's playing the nickel, all those things. The easy answer to that is that Jeremy Chinn is the nickel for the Raiders, because he would roll down from that safety spot into the slot and play the nickel. One of the many things that he does. He wears 50 hats for this defense, and Patrick Graham is using him in so many ways. But predominantly when we've seen them go to nickel, and we can talk about this because they showed it at the scrimmage. So they showed it to everybody. They showed it to the world. But so Jeremy Chinn is mainly the guy there in that nickel. He has been the nickel corner when they've gone to that package. That's been the look that I think that they favor the most. So we've seen him in the slot a lot. And in that package, particularly, Lonnie Johnson was the high safety who would come in next to Isaiah Polamau in that look. And another rangy guy who's crazy athletic and all these things and brings a good physicality to the table. So I liked that look. The coaching staff obviously did. And it was a solid unit. That was something all of us, in the media throughout practice have been like, "Ooh, man, this is a real interesting look." Now things get mixed up. And when Lonnie Johnson did go out, let's say this too. I mean, it sucked the air out of that place and the energy was just gone. It was definitely a different scrimmage after that happened. But once he was out of there, Darnay Holmes got mixed in a bit more, in a bit of that traditional look as a true nickel. Darnay was in the slot, which is something we've seen in practice. Again, we saw it today, and that is really his role. He is more of your nickel player when you're going to be in there in that true nickel formation. So we did see that. But in terms of the safeties who came in that package, when Chin moves down, Chris Smith II actually did get first crack at that. Later on in the scrimmage, Thomas Harper, he came in and took some reps at that spot as well. So there's likely going to be a battle going forward between those two guys. Chris Smith II, the kid out of Georgia, he's been out in the league for a couple years, mostly a special teamer, but been on the active roster, and so it's an interesting piece. And again, being the first guy coming up, you got to think that they like him the most for that spot. But Thomas Harper, another guy that will likely be in the mix, as there's now a new battle going on for that other high safety spot next to Isaiah Palomalo when they do go to that specific nickel look. The big thing there for me that raises a question is that neither one of them really fit the size profile that this staff is very clearly looking for. You know what I mean? Both of them are 5'10" and they're under 200 pounds. Chris Smith is pretty close. They have him listed as 197 on the roster, but they don't fit that rangy, big guy that can run, body type that Pete and them are looking for. So that brought me to the question and the thought of like, okay, well, they have a guy in JT Woods who they just recently signed, who Pete actually talked highly of, and who has been a safety, but he's been playing corner for the Raiders. I wonder, can he slide into that spot, or does he? Does the staff kind of slide him over there and give him a look there? Because, again, positional versatility, and he is also a bigger guy coming in at 6'2", 195. Doesn't top that 200-pound mark, but he does have the ranginess that the Raiders staff very clearly does seem to like. And he was playing some very physical football. We talked about it on the podcast recently that guy was laying the wood at practice. So you have to think that he'll factor into that. Obviously he was battling for some time at corner. Looked like he was likely going to be, a backup at the spot, probably a primary backup. But now if this ends up being a long-term thing for Lonnie Johnson Jr., I wonder if JT Woods finds his way into that competition at safety. And that's what kind of makes things interesting, because it could turn into a three-man race for that backup safety spot that becomes the first man off the bench when they go to that nickel with rolling Jeremy Chin down. Another thought that I had too, I think either way, no matter how it works out for JT Woods, as long as he does make this active roster, which I do think is going to be the case, he is going to be a very interesting special teams player. That guy's probably going to rack up a lot of stats and a lot of tackles on special teams, because he's like a big hit stick guy. It's very clear. So regardless, that's a guy to watch out for, especially in the preseason on that aspect of the game, the special teams aspect, because it is important. As our friend Eddie Pascal, who used to work for the Raiders, always says, special teams wins ball games. You need guys like that. With that, guys, though, let's talk about some of the threes. In particular, Cam Miller, the third-string quarterback. Yeah, I thought he's looked solid really the last week or so whenever he's gotten his opportunities. He seems comfortable for the most part. It seems like he's got a good grasp on things. Obviously, they're not throwing everything at him, but in the reps that we've seen, he's looked good. He's shown that he can thread the needle multiple times, in different practices. And today he did so on a nice slant to Colin Johnson. Really threw that thing in there between, some traffic, and it was an impressive throw. And much like we saw with Geno, he showed off the legs too. So that kid can move a bit too. He had a keeper for a score when they were down there too. And a lot of people have been asking about Tommy Mellott, the kid they got out of one of the Dakotas. Look, I just haven't seen a lot from him. And some of us in the media were talking about him too. Like, that was a guy that we thought would be an interesting watch because he's such a freaky athlete, and he won their version of the Heisman there at the FCS level. Just haven't seen a lot from him, and hasn't really flashed. It's very clear that he's still working on some things. But the athleticism, the twitchiness is 100% there. I think at this point, probably a guy that ends up on the practice squad and they keep developing him. And maybe he turns more into the guy we're about to talk about, which is Alex Bachman. That guy is really stealing the show among that group of receivers who are kind of like fringe fighting for a roster spot there. I think Bachman's going to figure out a way to get himself on this roster. That guy has been a really tough cover in one-on-ones. He's flashed in team, in 7-on. Obviously, he's a special teamer, real twitchy. Pete talked about him. He said none of that's going unnoticed. So that's a guy that I think could end up getting some playing time, or some burn. Maybe playing time's a little much to say on that. Let me pump the brakes on that. I get excited about the receivers, guys. Give me a break here. I think that's a guy that'll find a spot for himself on this roster because of all the things that he can do and the fact that Pete's taking notice. He's definitely caught all of our eyes for sure. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see what ends up doing for him in terms of when it comes roster cut time. Like, what do we see from the receiving core? It's going to be interesting who they end up keeping. But I think Alex Bachman, if he continues doing what he's doing, I think he's going to play his way onto this roster. But with that, guys, that is going to be it for today's show. We are off on Sunday because the Raiders, they're not practicing. So we get a day off, but it's not going to be a full day off for me, actually, because you know me, I like to get out and about, and we're promoting this brand because I want to grow this thing. So I'm actually going to be hopping on Fox Sports Radio on Sunday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. with my buddy Brian Feldman. If you guys do want to give that a listen, many of you will probably be at church. Totally understand. Don't play it in church. Don't be that guy. But if you do want to give it a listen, keep an eye out for the live stream link on Twitter. We will obviously be talking a lot of Raiders. That's going to be something I'm talking a lot about, obviously, especially here locally in Las Vegas as I launch this brand. But we're also going to kind of tiptoe back into the waters of my old job from when I was back at NBC, and we're going to be talking some Golden Knights. Yeah, Golden Knights hockey. The Knights are an interesting bunch. They just got Mitch Marner, so there's going to be a lot that we can dive into on that front as they try to get back to being Stanley Cup final challengers. But anyway, too, guys, if you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, what the heck are you doing, man? You got to sign up for that thing. To do that, go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to get that delivered right to your inbox every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. I'm telling you, it's good stuff. And also, do please make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you guys are listening to us. And if you did like what you heard, please do hit us with a 5-star review and leave a comment as well. You guys really don't understand how much those things help. And it does take 2 seconds to do it. The comments already have been amazing. I'm so appreciative of them. I heard one guy call me the Raiders content goat. Shout out to you, man. That was awesome. I'm just getting going. This is just the beginning of the content that we are going to be pushing out. I hope you guys know that. This is kind of the rough launch, which I think has already been pretty good. If I pat myself on the back here a little bit, but we have bigger and better things planned. We have more and more guests lined up. On Monday, we're going to be talking to Jason Horowitz, who's the radio voice for the Raiders. He's going to be awesome. He was out at the stadium today and has been at practice all week, so we'll get his takeaways on Monday. But, it's all part of this process as we continue to move forward with this brand and to try and grow the brand. Because like I've said many times, guys, I want to turn this into the trusted source for all of you Raiders fans. And with your guys' help, we can make that happen. So tell your friends about what's going on. But if you guys do also want to get in on the action, we're going to be doing some Q&A podcasts soon as well. I'll start maybe doing those maybe once a week, once every other week. I'm not really sure on the cadence yet, but we'll figure it out. The only thing, though, is if you do want to submit your questions, I need you to go hit up silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to us there to do that. And I know I'm pushing you to pay for stuff, and I'm sorry, but that's the easiest way for me to do it because I'll be sending out Q&A forms to all the premium subscribers who can actually go and submit their questions for the podcast. So that's going to be a direct line to me so that I can answer those questions. And I think it'll be a cool setting to be able to do it because like I said, I'd love to be able to answer everyone's questions on Twitter and all the other social media channels. But honestly, there have been so many of them and it's just not possible. It's a lot of work, doing that. So doing it in one sitting in this podcast form where I can give you guys my full attention, I think that is the easiest way to do it. And again, if you sign up as a premium member, you will be able to get those questions in and I will give each of those answers my full attention and thought, to be able to give you guys the best insight that I possibly can for that. So again, please do that. That'd be cool. The Q&As are going to be fun. I enjoy answering your guys' questions, and I think that'll be a fun format to do it. But anyway, guys, as always, please continue to watch and listen. We appreciate you guys doing that so far. It's been awesome. The response has been great. And hey, look, we'll be back at it again on Monday. That's a big week. It's a game week for the Raiders as they get set to go to Seattle to play their first preseason game. Football is officially back for the Raiders. Thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you next time.